Hey guys, my name is Taib, and I'm basically making this video to try and help you guys prepare for tomorrow's philosophy test. Now, I do have a bit of a sore throat, and I'm going to be drinking some liquids to help with that sore throat, but I might cough in the middle of discussion, or I might stumble upon a few words, so please forgive me for that, but I will try to keep this video as short and as detailed as possible to summarize all the main concepts that we need to be prepared for tomorrow's test. So without further ado, let's get started. The professor, she has mentioned that tomorrow's test will be covering the following material, which involves Plato and his whole Thaddeus, I still know how to pronounce that whole Thaddeus thing. Gettier, mainly the Gettier problems, which he brings up in whole Justified True Belief, and also Goldman and his proposal to solve the Gettier problems, as well as his theory of the causal theory and causal theory of knowing. So let's get into these concepts. So let's start talking about Plato. Now, with the whole paper thing, and all of Plato's Thaddeus, the main point you have to know is his whole argument that at a minimum, knowledge involves true belief. This whole concept of true belief. This is where it starts off. He argues that no one can know what is false. Now, people may believe what they know, that they know something that is maybe in fact false. Like people say that they know something, and it's true that it could be false, but it's not that they really know something. They only think that they know based off their own perceptions. And so because of that, we start to raise that question in epistemology. Epistemology is the whole unit that we're talking about, the whole theory of knowing. So this is where we start to come up with these questions if people actually know that they know something. This whole debate starts to pop up, and philosophers are all bring up their theories on how they think that they know something. And from this, later on, we start to get into the Gettier problems. Now, with a lot of philosophers, they don't really say what knowledge is. They just say what knowledge isn't. Like, this cannot be knowledge and this cannot be knowledge, but they don't really tell us what knowledge actually is. And Gettier Gettier gets involved in his whole Gettier problem situations. Now, Gettier is the one who brings up the Gettier problems, and he's the one who gets involved with this whole idea of suggesting the analysis for justified true belief in relation of whether or not we actually know something. And I'm going to put up a few slides to help me explain this. You guys recall the whole S and P thing that we talked about in class. Now, for those of you that don't know, S stands for subject and P stands for proposition. So, according to Gettier, we have three conditions in the justified true belief analysis that involve S and P, and the three conditions are P is true, S believes P, and S is justified. Now, for the first two conditions, P is true and S believes P, those two, there's no debate on those two issues because, they make sense. Knowledge latches on to truths, and for S believes P, full belief is necessary. A hunch is simply not enough to say that you know something, so you need to have full belief. Those make sense to us, right? Now, the third concept about S is justified, this whole idea of justification and how we justify these certain concepts to say whether or not we know something, this is where we start getting involved with the Gettier problems. Now, according to Gettier, justification is not the same thing as knowing something. Instead, justification is part. You need justification to have knowledge. And he also brings up the concept that, there can also be cases where there is justified false belief that supports his idea of justification not being equal to knowledge. And an example of this is back in the old days, before we had, spaceships and all these things that could go above the earth and say that the earth is, round. People before that could just look across the land, say, well, I walk on a flat surface, so, the earth must be flat. And that would be justified because from their own perception, they see flat land. They're walking flat. They're not walking like this or down or into, deep caverns. They're not walking on a curve. And because we didn't have anything else at the time, this was justified. But it's justified and it's false because now we know with further knowledge that, the earth is actually round. And that's just an example of justified false belief. Now, with the justified true belief analysis, it said that if a justified belief turns out to be true, then it is knowledge. And this is also challenged by further Gettier problems. Ideally, Gettier believes that if your thing is justified and it's true, it's still not knowledge. You still need more than that. And there's a very simple case that, shows this, You might hear about the whole 10 coin thing, but a very simple case of this is, let's say I'm going to the lecture hall, right? And I look at the clock and I say, oh, it's 3 o'clock, right? Now, what I don't know is that the clock is broken, right? The hands are not moving, so the clock's not working. But in reality, it could actually be 3 o'clock. And if I look at the clock and the hands are on, 12 and 3, the clock says 3 o'clock. It's not working though. But I look at the clock and I say it is 3 o'clock. The truth is, it is 3 o'clock. But do I actually know it's 3 o'clock? This is where we get into it. So, am I justified? Yes, I'm looking at a clock. The clock says 3 o'clock. Is it true that it's 3 o'clock? Yes, it is true that it is 3 o'clock. And it's justified because I looked at the clock to do it. But I didn't know that the clock is not working. And because the clock is not working, we can't really say that I know it's 3 o'clock because the clock's not working. And that's where we get into the Gettier problem. And now we get into the third concept, which is Goldman. Now, like Gettier, Goldman also rejects the JTB analysis, justified true belief analysis. He rejects it as well. But at the same time, he also tries to solve the Gettier problems. And he does this with his causal theory, He says that knowing a fact is equal to having a belief that is caused by that fact. Now, in his example, he says that, well, not he says, but this is just an example. In a classic Gettier case, right, you see a guy walking in the desert, right? And, he's so tired and thirsty, he's hallucinating because of the heat, right? Let's say there's a glass of water in the desert. Now, he's hallucinating, right? Now, there could actually be a glass of water in the desert. There could actually be water in the desert, but because he's hallucinating, we can't really say that he knows that there's water in the desert. It's just a coincidence. However, Goldman brings up an example that says if someone is just walking on a regular day, right? The sun is out, but, they're not hallucinating, they're not, tired of thirst or anything like that. And they see like a glass of water on the table or something, right? You see the glass of water, and that, according to Goldman, that is more than enough to say that you actually know that there is water. So you're justified in your belief. Now, Goldman's official formulation, back to the S&P examples, is S knows that P, if and only if, the fact that P is causally connected in an appropriate way with S's believing P. Now, these appropriate causal connections follow, a path, and an example of this is sensory perception, testimony, and inference, which we discussed in class as well. And I'll give you guys an example. So, let's say an astronaut goes into space, and he discovers this brand new, mineral in space, He's there in space. He's the one experiencing it. And for him, according to Goldman, that is more than enough, justification to say that he knows something because he actually went there. He experienced the experiments, the discoveries. He's the one who made the discovery, so he knows something. The astronaut who made the discovery knows something. Now, down on Earth, we have, people in the lab that are talking to the space guy, right? They're the one who's helping him out on the mission. Now, his knowledge is being broadcasted down back to Earth where these, scientists are helping him. And now they also know the knowledge because he knows the knowledge. So, sensory perception is the astronaut experiencing the whole discovering the new material. And the professors and the scientists, they can testify that because, they were on the same research mission and they were helping him out. And because, they have a status of education, they can say that they know something as well. And now we go to inference. So let's say that these scientists wrote, journals and articles and books that, we give our students, we teach them, right? And so these articles by these famous scientists could end up in the hands of a student who's studying at university, and they read about this new material that was discovered in space by this astronaut, right? Now, the student, they didn't go to space, they didn't see the mineral themselves. So normally people would say that does she really know something? But because this is, according to Goldman, the appropriate causal connections, where we went from sensory perception, testimony, and inference, we can say that she does know something because it is reliable. The astronaut is reliable because he was there and he actually conducted the experiment. He actually knows something. Then the scientists that were helping him on Earth, they were helping him on the mission even though they weren't there in space, so they didn't actually experience it. But because they're helping on the mission, they have an actual academic status, they can say that they know knowledge as well. And because this student is receiving this knowledge from academic professors, she can say that she knows something even though she didn't really experience it. And according to Goldman, that is more than enough to say that her belief is justified. So that's how he thinks that he's solved the Gettier problem. And the thing is, with Gettier, right, he would still argue with this because he says that they're not justified. But that's the idea of Goldman. Instead of having belief, truth, and justification, Goldman has belief, truth, and causal connection. That's his causal theory. I can give you guys another example. Like, let's say when I was a kid, right? Let's say I was watching a National Geographic documentary, and I learned from that documentary that cheetahs can run 80 miles per hour, that cheetahs are the fastest animals in the world, right? Now I'm 18, right? So I can say that I can still say that I know cheetahs are the fastest land animals in the world. I know how fast cheetahs can run. And let's say I can't recall what that documentary was. Like, I forgot the name of that documentary. Even then, according to Goldman, I still have knowledge that I still know that cheetahs are the fastest animal in the world, even if I can't recall where I got that information from. But it is a true fact, it is believable, and there is, causal connection. So therefore, I still know. Now, Goldman, later on, he did realize that there is one issue with his, theory. He has a Goldman problem now. So, and I know these are very extreme examples, but they do technically make sense. So, let's say that a father and son are on a drive, right? This is from Goldman. Father and son are on a drive, and the father's saying, they're driving through a field, and the father says, oh, look, son, that there's a cow, there's a horse, and then they see a barn, so he says, look, son, that's a barn. And what the father and son don't know is that the field that they're driving through actually has a whole bunch of fake barns, like fake one-sided barns, as like part of a fair or some reason, right? So it's a whole field of fake barns, but it just so happens that the barn that they're looking at is a real barn. So we can't say that they actually know that that's a barn because there are lots of other fake barns around it. And because of this, we can't say that they know it because their information is unreliable. Now, the whole concept of reliabilism, back to S&P, is S knows that P, if and only if, S has a true belief formed by a reliable belief forming process. So the general idea in this example is that normally, according to Goldman, your sensory perception is more than enough to say that you actually know something and it's believable too. But with this example, we say that visual barn detecting capacity in fake barn country, because of that, you don't really know that there are barns there because there's lots of fake barns around. But in this case, if there's a visual barn recognition directed at this very barn, like if you're looking at the one real barn in all these fake barns and you're looking at the one real one, then it's still believed that you actually know that there's a barn there. It's the same kind of idea that's saying, like, let's say you bought a lottery ticket, right? You bought a lottery ticket, you put your ticket in, and now there's like a 99.99999% chance that you lost, right? So you'll be shaking your head like, yeah, man, of course I lost. There's no way I won, right? Now, because the odds are against you, and those are reliable odds too, but you still can't say that you know that you've lost until you actually heard that you lost. So to summarize these concepts, let's go over them one more time real quickly. Plato's paper says and argues that at a minimum, knowledge involves true belief. No one can know what is false, and people may believe what they know, that they know something is in fact false. But in that case, they don't really know that something is false. They just think that they know something. Gettier brings up his Gettier problems and says that you need to justify true belief in order to say that you know something. He gives his conditions of what we say we need in order to say that we know something. And he gives us all these different examples about the clock or the coins, or even that example about the fire where there's a fire and there's a whole swarm of bugs around that look like smoke. You see from a distance and you say, "Oh, there's a fire there," but you don't know that because what you think you're looking at smoke, but we see is a whole bunch of flies. So basically, with Gettier problems, they just show us that coincidence can happen and you don't actually know something until you have certain conditions for it. And finally, Goldman suggests that we don't always need these conditions, and instead, our own sensory perception and our causal theory is more than enough to say that we indeed have knowledge. Now, these concepts are all very confusing, I know, and I probably did not explain it that very well either, but it may help to go back to the readings. There's some great YouTube videos, especially with Crash Course, and this one YouTube channel that I'm currently watching. What is it called? Wireless Philosophy. They give some really great videos regarding epistemology, and I really highly suggest to watch those videos. But yeah, best of luck to you guys, and I hope everyone does extremely well on this test.